Welcome to Stay Fearless, the FSP podcast with all things baseball performance. I am your co-host and co-founder of Fearless Sports Performance, Joey Hanley.
And I'm your co-host and co-founder, Dr. Alex Acevedo, and welcome to another episode of the pod. Welcome everybody. Hopefully this is learning experience for everybody. We're gonna have some cool people on the pod, and just this will be a great space to be able to learn, talk, share ideas, and create a nice space for growth. We'll jump into it.
Yeah, and also on that note, not only that, but we just want to be able to put out some good stuff that just helps the baseball community overall, and get outreach to more athletes, other coaches who maybe have some different ideas, different thoughts, and we want to make this as interactive as possible. So during these episodes, throughout it, or at the end, just drop comments in there, DM us, let us know your thoughts on what we're talking about, whether it be controversial stuff, if you're agreeing with us, whatever it is. Interact, and let's get this thing rocking in the baseball world.
Yeah, 100%. And we definitely everything we say is not scripture. We definitely don't know all the answers. Just as nobody does. And we're doing this because we want to grow and learn as much as we can. So if you disagree with us, there is a chance that we could be wrong 100%. I've been wrong many times before, and we'll be wrong, many times in the future. So we love that positive dialogue and to learn and stuff like that. So if you disagree with us, please reach out. Let's talk. If you agree with us, reach out. Let's talk. If you want to go even further and talk about other stuff, reach out. Let's talk. And let's make this a really positive experience for everybody involved.
Let's do it. All right, so let's hop in. First things first, let's talk about how did you and me meet. Let's get to the heart and soul of Fearless Sports Performance. Yeah. How we met, where we went from there, and then where did we get business engaged and then business married. Let's go from there.
Yeah, man. Let's the Fearless story, man. The Fearless story started actually in a little known place called Plant City, Florida, middle of freaking nowhere, right outside of Tampa. And Joey and I were training at the Florida Baseball Ranch, formerly known as the Florida Baseball Ranch. Now it's the Florida Baseball Armory, run by Randy Sullivan. Shout out to him. Garrison Roy, who's been a great mentor for the two of us and a great friend of ours, was there too. And he played a big part in my life getting into the baseball performance sphere. But yeah, so we met at the Florida Baseball Ranch. We were staying in a house together. And Joey and I felt like we clicked a lot during that time there. Got really close, and we shared a lot of the same ideas and the same passions. And things kind of went from there. And we just kind of kept in touch through the years. And we had some great memories there. So when we were there for the summer. I don't know, how long were you there for?
I was there for about 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks, somewhere along that lines.
Okay, and I think I was there for what, like 2 or 3, 4, I don't know.
I want to say you were there for probably a little bit longer than me, but you came in
later,
or two.
I came in a week after you, and then I stayed like a week longer than you, or something like that.
Yeah, it was something like that. Yeah, I came in with a former teammate of mine from the JC I was playing at the time.
Yeah, and it was a great experience. I mean, it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was just training all day long. That was basically our lives. We were all staying in a house together. We'd get up early, we'd train for hours, and then we'd come home, eat. We'd all pig out, and then we'd just like knock out for a few hours because we were all dead. And then we'd wake up, eat more, hang out, go back to sleep, get up, train.
Play ping pong.
Yeah, play a bunch of ping pong. We had fun, man. That was a great time.
We would train our ass off, and I remember I sent a video of me just like destroying somebody in ping pong, and my parents are like, "I'm not paying for you to go down there and play ping pong. I'm paying for you to go down there and train and be a better baseball player." And I was just like, "Oh my God!" Like,
you're so tired at the end of the day. That was crazy, man. We were there. It was like what, 4 or 5 hour days of just straight training.
Yeah. So I mean, we woke up at like what time? I mean, we probably wake up around like 6 or something. I mean, it started probably around 7.
7?
Probably
Yeah.
it probably started around 7:30, and it always started with like the motivational talks, and then we would go right into our warm-ups, and then from there, I think they split us into groups of some people would throw first, some people would work out first, or I think maybe everybody threw first.
Everybody
Oh,
threw
you
first.
know what?
But then the lifts, we had like one type of lift and
Yeah,
another type of lift, and that would flip flop.
yeah,
Yeah.
you had a lift every day, and you had one of the savage circuits every day, and they would flip it. I think you and me were actually in separate lifting groups though. And then yeah, we would do it from there where it was like some guys had the savage training first, some guys had the lifting first. I always wanted to have the lifting first, the freaking going from the same training. It's just hit basically. It's insane cardio.
That was
And
hot, dude. It was so hot and sweaty in that little
oh,
too, man.
you can't be afraid to take your shirt off or you're just gonna die.
Oh no, I was shirtless every day. Everybody was, man. It was insane over there. And you're in the swamp, like it was no fun, man. It was no fun, but it was good. I mean, definitely built us up, built resilience, tested us. That was all, I thought it was a real positive experience for me. And we met. So that's definitely,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah.
so, through the years we kept in touch. I think and it was actually at the ranch that like month or whatever. I remember waking up one day and I was like, man, because originally I wanted to go to law school. I was like, man, I don't read, but then I like find myself reading books on like performance and training and health and throwing and all that. Like, man, like I could just do this with my life. And that's kind of when I made that decision that I was gonna, change my track, and get in the trenches in baseball for the rest of my life. But through the years we kind of knew that we had similar goals for our lives, similar visions of what we wanted to build. And then what was it? It was during COVID that we kind of decided to make the step forward.
Yeah, I think it was during COVID. I mean, I remember I think I was 14 when I thought it like I was like, you know what? If I'm not going to be a professional baseball player one day, I'm going to help people become professional baseball players. Like that was my thing because I really started like Eric Cressy. And I grew up in Chicago. So at the time I was going to a place called Fastball USA run by Mike Ryan. It's a great place. It's definitely more of a hitting facility. But they had like all the same connections that Randy and Ron do with the ranch. And which is where I actually had heard about the ranch. But I had a passion for training. Like I was helping coach kids when I was like, a freshman, just helping give tips and like doing video analysis. I mean, did I know what I was doing? Probably not. But like I think that was always my thing was I just loved helping other teammates out in that capacity. And that was a big thing that I think we talked about while we were in Florida too, was just like you were very like, oh, I'd love to train people. And I was kind of like, yeah, like, dude, this is my like my jam. Like, this is what I'm going to do. If I'm not going to play professional ball, I'm going to do this. And so I knew from like 14, that that's what I wanted to do. And especially I think after I broke my back when I was 15, all you can do is really rehab and train from there. And I just kind of fell in love with the whole process of training. Like I almost always look forward to the off season more than the in season, to be honest, because that was like my thing. I loved training so much, and every aspect of training, the strength, conditioning, the throwing, like all of that. Super in love with that. And that's really where my passion for that started. And yeah, I think that's it. I just always loved coaching guys, and every time I went to school, I looked forward to helping guys with some other stuff. I had great training partners who were along the same lines. Some of them are minor leaguers now, which is pretty cool. Not taking credit for their career, they were just awesome with like coaching things and everything, because I thought they were great coaches too. And yeah, that's pretty much where it started for me. It was just like I was 14 and I was like, I freaking love this. Like this is dope, because there was nothing else for me to really do. It was just train and try and be a baseball player.
Yeah, yeah. I totally feel you, man. I mean, I've always been a baseball junkie. And so like, I always tell guys, because people always ask me like, oh, watch football game, basketball game, whatever. And it's like, especially playoffs, like I'll watch other sports and stuff. But like when it's not baseball season, I always tell people I'm literally just staring out the window waiting for baseball season to come around
Yeah.
because I'm such a baseball junkie, man, that it's like baseball's all I think about. It's all I do. It's all I live. Like it truly is my passion. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's kind of what led me to being like, all right, like I can't do anything else. I got to be in this and I got to be in the trenches. And I've always been someone that was, more like, I've always been someone that was kind of under, I wasn't good. Like growing up, I just wasn't good at baseball. So it was either suck, get cut and you're done, or, figure out how to be better. So my entire life, like, from when I was a kid, I was always worse than everybody else. Like there was never a point in my life. Maybe I think I was playing in a really crappy rec league in middle school. And during middle school, I was one of the better players in the rec league. But like when it came to like everybody else my age around the country in the city of Miami, I was always like bad. Like my entire life, I was bad. So it was either figure out how to get better or like you're done with baseball. And I learned quickly because I always had, the work ethic, but I learned quickly that it wasn't just work ethic that you needed. You needed to have the work ethic with the right stuff. And that's kind of where my passion for this comes from with wanting to help guys out is like I started to learn a lot, especially in high school, of how to train. But I felt like because I was having to learn it all on my own and I didn't have a ton of people that truly knew, especially, the times, training was just starting to blow up and change within baseball. And so I didn't have like a ton of that knowledge readily available. So because I had to figure it out on my own, I felt like it took longer. And a lot of the things that I feel like if I would have known earlier, a lot of things that I learned later on, late in high school, college, and even now, post baseball career. If I would have known that when I was younger, maybe things would have changed. Maybe things would have been a little bit different. Maybe I would have been a little bit better. And I could have gotten a little bit more out of myself earlier on and raised my ceiling. But I have no regrets because I love where it all took me. And I love the struggle of finding that knowledge that I feel like I had to go through to get where I am. And I learned a lot of valuable lessons in that. I learned, how to gain knowledge, which is super important. And I'm glad that I ended up where I am because I truly feel like this is the sphere that I kind of belong. I always had that passion for helping my teammates, helping guys around. I was never like in a bubble, just focused on myself. I'm someone that, I always have to, speak up if I see someone doing something and I feel like there's something valuable that I can offer, or something valuable they can offer me, or just like a conversation to be had. So that's kind of what led me into that passion. And then we'll kind of bring it back over to where we left off with the Fearless story. So during COVID, I think it was so obviously during that COVID season got cut off. You ended up calling it and just jumping into the coaching career. And then I took the extra fifth year, but we both had a ton of time during that kind of lockdown period. Remember, we were both kind of training guys. I was training some of my teammates.
Yeah.
And we started talking about kind of what we were doing, and where we kind of saw our lives going, and we kind of saw them going in the same place. So we started collaborating, and kind of helping each other out. And then what I think we decided to say like, hey, you know what, we're and at the time, I don't know if you were training guys remotely, in person yet, but I was training guys all remotely, and we're like, you know what, we can kind of like market this together and kind of build each other up. And then I think organically it just kind of came together and has kind of grown into what Fearless is today.
Yeah, I think I gave up that extra year because I took so many credits that senior year just to graduate. So I was in biomechanics plus lab, research plus lab, XPhys plus lab, motor learning plus lab, and history of sports and senior sem at the same time during my senior season. So in the spring. So I was in all these classes. I think I paid like an extra 1,000 something just to get that like one extra credit to graduate on time. And I almost contemplated not even playing my senior year. I was so over just like the drama that I created of baseball. Like baseball didn't I mean, I did have a toxic team. Like there's no kind of like getting around that. Like I had a toxic team, but I played into it. I played victim into it a lot too. And it got to the point for me where I was pulling that crap of like, my coach hates me type crap, where I was just like, you know what, F this. I don't really want to come back. So I remember saying at the beginning of the year to one of my buddies on the team, he was another PO of mine who he was kind of like one of my ride or die dudes who just like whatever kind of happened, we were on the same page, whether that be positive or negative. And I remember telling him, if they cut this season short, I will not care. And they cut the season short right as I started to pitch better. But there was kind of a sigh of relief because I realized that I wasn't leaving it all on the table anymore. Like it was time to hang it up. And I think that's a big reason that I fell in love with men's league too, is it's not that it was like, oh, I have unfinished business. It's just like, I didn't want to end everything like hating baseball so much. And I didn't hate baseball. I just hated playing it at that point. Like, because I was just in a toxic environment. I think anyone that's been in that kind of environment, whether that be sports or your own family or whatever it is, knows that you'll do whatever and convince yourself of whatever to kind of get out of that. So I took that year. I automatically knew I wanted to get into coaching. I hit up a guy that had a facility out here in Santa Clarita. And I was like, hey, I want to be a coach. Like, it's time. Let's get this started. Like halfway through my senior year, I started getting like templates ready. I started getting assessment templates ready. I was just like giddy to get into coaching. I wasn't going to graduation. I was just going straight into this coaching thing. So I worked in a facility for 3 months, 3 months. And we kept in contact, and I was like trying to come up with a cool brand name because I didn't want to use my own name. I just think, I don't know, I'm not the biggest fan of how that is. So I think I called it like dynamic pitching performance. And my dad, my dad's
cool logo, cool name.
Yeah, my dad's an artist. He put together a pretty cool logo for me. He put like several together. And I grabbed like 2 athletes out of that facility to one remote, one in person. I did not steal them. The owner told me that I could work with some of these guys. So, they followed up, and they worked with me for a while. One of them, still is working with me. So, but yeah, and then I think it was just like, this industry is tough. It's competitive. There are a lot of smoking mirrors in it, and you and me both just wanted to make an impact, and we realized that this would be a smoother and easier ride if we did it together versus, going at it alone. And I think there was also a give and take to it, where you entering PT school was going to really help us with like some connections, and it was going to help grow some of the knowledge and the business side of things. And me kind of hitting the ground running was able to, get some athletes under our belt, get some experience. And it's been a really good mix so far. And yeah, I mean, that's the beginning of Fearless 2020 in the middle of COVID, wearing masks out on my parents' tennis court, training guys, like no equipment, like, I think I had one set of driveline balls, a trampoline, like a driveline trampoline, a really mushy bench with a crappy barbell, one set of plates from like 45 down, a turf mound, and one of those old, like, 12-through-1 pitching pads. Like, it was just like, I cannot believe some of those guys stayed, because there was like nothing state of the art about it whatsoever. It was just like,
that's the grind of it. But there's an art to training, right? Like, it's more than just the equipment you have. It's the art of being able to kind of manage the progression and managing it's more than just like flashy stuff, flashy exercises, flashy equipment. It's really about like, okay, do we have a plan and how are we managing that plan and adjusting accordingly? And I think that's one of the
Yeah.
things that we try to pride ourselves on. Um, and kind of separate ourselves with is we're not just kind of like inking something together that we're giving everybody kind of the same general plan or general program. We really take our time to make sure everybody's getting individualized work and everything's getting looked at very carefully, which I think that's what's really made Fearless grow and what you've done a great job with. Because I've been in school, I haven't been able to do as much as you've been doing the last few years. Um, and I feel like that's big, and that's a huge part of training in baseball. Like you really like everybody's different. Everybody's so different, and you really have to be honing in on what you specifically need to see the most efficient results, the
Yeah.
largest results ultimately.
Yeah. I mean, it does come down to results. Guys want to be with people who hand them and yield them the results that they're looking for. Um, so, I mean, a big part of Fearless also is definitely our own individual backstories. Um, for me, I mean, you talked about yourself. You said you weren't a guy who was, the most standoutish. For
Yeah.
me, I was kind of somewhere in the middle. I played high school with the dudes who were studs. I mean, our entire pitching staff, my junior, senior year, were all going college. I was just the only one not going Division 1. I was going Division 3. All of them were going to Division 1. I was playing with like 88 to 93 guys. Even our bullpen was just fantastic. So I didn't like totally stand out, but I definitely was above most people. I think the older I got, the more I sort of fell behind, and it wasn't oh, I'm going to rely on my talent type thing. I always worked really hard. Um, when I go back to Chicago for Thanksgiving and everything, I always go meet with my coach, and he's just like, hardest worker I've had. And but it goes, you can work really hard at something that doesn't help you. I think, I've talked about this before. I was loyal to programs that didn't yield me the best results, and I think also that kind of brought me into a bitter space when I was like, I work harder than that guy. Why is he better than me? Things like that. And I was like the shortest guy on staff too. I played with guys who were like 6'2" to 6'5".
Yeah, we both
So
have that in common. We don't have
yeah,
the genetic makeup to really
no,
have that natural ability. We have to make it ourselves.
yeah. But I was always one of the stronger guys, and I think that was probably one of my downfalls, was just like falling in love with the weight room so much, because like I couldn't grow vertically, so I had to grow horizontally, and I mean, I just fell like way too in love with the weight room in that aspect. But um,
Not
again,
that
that's
there's
not
anything wrong with loving the weight room and training your butt off in the weight room. You
no.
got to do that. You got to do that. And there's a lot of athletes that don't do that enough. But there's many aspects to being good at baseball. You got to hit all facets. You can't
Yeah,
just kind of hone in on one and forget the others.
yeah, and I think that was a big
Clarify for our listeners.
yeah. Like I think I was just focusing so much on like lift heavy, throw weighted balls. Like I forgot the art of like actually like playing a lot of catch, feeling it out, being on the mound as much as possible. Like I just spent too much time like being a meathead in that aspect. But I mean, another part of it also, like going into backstories too, is like, so obviously, so like anyone who's followed me and like that I've battled epilepsy the majority of well, since I was 15 years old. So 11 years now. That's been a thing for me. And the more like strong I felt, the more I felt like I could overcome some of these things. Because there was a point in time where, so the summer of 2015, I junior summer, which is like the biggest summer for most athletes. Um, and again, you and me kind of came up in the time where showcases started to become a big thing, like training started to become a big thing. Like a lot of the stuff that people are doing like on an everyday basis
It was
was
just
like,
kind of, it was just starting.
yeah, yeah, like
I remember growing up, like I started doing weighted balls, I guess, relatively early. Some of the like, I mean, driveline, I feel like was the big like pioneer
Driveline was
for a lot
brand.
of people. Yeah, and I remember like in high school, I started doing some of that stuff. In college, I was like the only guy doing some of that stuff early in those like first couple of years that I was in college. And I remember guys looking at me like, dude, what are you doing? Like I hit the Mark Pro, which is now massive. Like everybody
Yeah,
loves the Mark Pro, and that's like a fan favorite. I was just with the Guardians for my last clinical rotation of PT school this spring. And you know, I mean, that's like an everyday thing for everybody, like stuff like that. It's like you don't even think twice. Like it's great. Everybody loves it. It works great. And I remember I would do that like my freshman year of college, and guys would look at me like, "Dude, what are you doing? You look like a total idiot." Like, and like I do some of the weighted ball stuff, and people be like, "Bro, that's not gonna help you. Like, it's a waste of your time. Like, that's so weird." And people thought it
yeah,
was so weird some of the training stuff, and today it's normal. Everybody does it. It's like very accepted. But yeah, we grew up in a time where all that stuff was brand new and it was weird, and everybody was like, "That doesn't work." But, I mean, I remember growing up as a kid, and there was still the belief that pitchers shouldn't lift weights, which is just
yeah.
mind-boggling to me that that was even thought at any point. You know?
Mm-hmm. Or at least don't move overhead, which is like,
Yeah, yeah.
what?
Our entire sport as pitchers is overhead. You know?
Yeah,
Of course, there's
yeah,
you know you want to be safe with every movement you do, overhead or not. But you got to strengthen in those ranges of motion.
yeah. Mm-hmm. That's another thing we should talk about sometime is maybe even like Olympic lifting, just like high risk, high reward type deal. I
Yeah.
mean, there's plenty of college strength coaches who do Olympic lifting, and there are plenty of elite programs out there that do Olympic lifting. It's not one of those things where I would ever be like, do not Olympic lift. I'm not probably, I don't see myself ever programming Olympic lifting, um, just due to the very high risk nature of it.
Yeah.
Um, and
You can get the same kind of result with
yeah,
much lower risk movements.
yeah, exactly. That's another thing, but that could be another like totally different topic for a podcast at some point. But yeah, man. I mean, back
So
to
we were talking about because I interrupted you and I think that got us off topic. You were talking about your story and where were we at? Oh, you fell in love with weightlifting.
oh yeah, I was saying with the epilepsy battle
Yes.
that summer going into my senior year, so the junior summer going into my senior year, I had 11 seizures. I
High
lost
school.
30 pounds. What?
High school, right?
High school, correct. I had 11 seizures. I lost 30 pounds. That's actually when I first went to Randy Sullivan, which it was called the Armory at that point. So I went down to his place, and I had to I didn't quit baseball, but I had to quit like going to tournaments, quit showcases, all this stuff because I went from being like mid 80s to like, oh man, I think on a good day I was topping like 77. I was sitting like 73. And Scouts would come out to these tournaments and showcases and just be like, dude, like either you're a liar or like you're hurt, something with the velocity. And so I just, I got more introduced to the weightlifting at that point, and I think it helped me feel a little bit, obviously physically, but also mentally tougher and stronger. So that was a big thing for me too, because I was always like undersized until I was like 21, 22 years old. I walked into, so I left my junior year of college 175 pounds, and I walked in senior year at 200 pounds. um, and everyone was just like, bro, what roid are you on? And I was like, protein. uh, so that was my thing, was just like I always wanted to be bigger and everything like that. Just and there, I mean, there's a positive to that for sure. Like you said, like you do need to be in the weight room 100%. Like I think the majority of the athletes that I work with in high school are totally undersized. And that also really plays into their recovery. Like I always recovered really well. Just
And
because
again, to kind of hit on what we were talking about, like you mentioned a lot of these guys are undersized. The weight
Yeah.
room, not like I remember something I fell into in high school is like I thought, oh, I'm small, I need to get in the weight room, and that's going to solve it. And yes, you need to get in the weight room to get stronger, but there's more that plays into it. There's so many different facets. Your nutrition,
Mhm.
how are you recovering? How are you sleeping?
Yeah.
Like that's a big part of it too. If you work out, and you're eating nothing, you're not going to get bigger. Doesn't matter how much you work out. And that was something that I didn't realize, which now I think about and I'm like, that's so obvious. But I didn't realize that when I was in high school. I just thought if I go to the gym every day for an hour or 2 hours, I'm going to get stronger. It doesn't matter how much I eat or don't eat. Um, and yeah, just another tidbit, but continue. Sorry.
No, you're chill. You're chill. Um, yeah, no, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. It was, yeah, just like you have to stress everything to grow it, but you have to feed it too. You have to be able to sleep and
Build it
recover.
up.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, and something I noticed definitely amongst guys who, no matter how elite they are in high school, how low on the food chain they might be, is when they're undersized. It's just like they're sore more often, they're lethargic more often, they're not recovering between outings as well. You know, I've noticed that the bigger these guys get, healthy, big, obviously, we're not telling people to become obese. Don't do the McDonald's and Wendy's diet, but
And of course,
like,
there's extreme examples everywhere. Like you see a guy like
yeah,
Tristan McKenzie doing great in the bigs. I mean, you could make the argument, he's had some injuries in the past. Maybe if he adds a little bit of weight, a little bit of mass, maybe it's better. But it's also so complex; it's hard to know. But at the end of the day, like yeah, I mean, you see that with that recovery, it's more than just you need to get big to throw hard. You also gotta get big or big enough to be healthy, to recover well, to feel good every time you go out there, to be able to go a full season. And as you go up in the levels, from high school to college, that jump in volume is pretty significant. The seasons are longer. Then you go from college to pro ball. Now you're playing, 100+ games in a season. I mean, that's so many innings on your body. You're not going to be able to handle that if you're undersized, or at least it's a lot harder to handle that if you're undersized. Of course, there's
yeah,
examples of extremes that are able to do it on both ends, but it's not easy. I mean, it makes it a lot harder, that's for sure. A lot more has to go right, or you have to be just a complete genetic freak to be able to handle that volume if you don't have the building blocks to be able to handle that stress.
yeah, for sure. And I think Walker Bueller actually just talked about that the other day, where he just said he was putting on as much weight as possible to prevent. Now his injuries were pretty spread out, though. He didn't have a DeGrom example where they were really close together, or Dustin May. But I mean, he's always been a thin dude. He came back looking a little bit more.
Thank you.
I don't know
Yeah.
how many. I don't know how many pounds he put on, but
Yeah. He's thicker.
I
He
mean,
looks good. Looks
yeah,
good.
yeah, he looks really good. His stuff looks good. Like he looks like Walker Bueller. I don't know if he's dropped much velocity or not, but I know he did talk about how he needed to get a little bit bigger to kind of protect those surrounding structures that would protect his elbow.
Gives your
But
body a little bit more like, power to endure. You know what I mean?
yeah,
We talk about it. I mean, so for those of you listening that don't know me, I'm a doctor of physical therapy. And PT, we talk about a lot post injury. We're just trying to get calories in guys like post surgery, right? Guy comes out
yeah,
of TJ. We're just trying to get calories in a dude. Like it doesn't matter. Like we don't care if they get a little bit of fatter. We just have to get calories in them because calories are going to give their body the ability to recover, to the ability to build, right? And like, yeah, that's an extreme, that's post surgery. But if you have a little bit more mass, your body has a little bit more, I guess, energy to kind of build itself back, right? If you're eating enough, if you're strong enough, if you have a little bit of fat on your body, fat. There has to be a certain level of essential fat that everybody has, a certain percentage. Doesn't have to be a ton, but like your body needs it to survive. It is a source of energy for our body, and that energy is going to power the muscles and the structures that are protecting our joints, protecting our passive structures and all that. Like you need a little bit of that mass. Like it makes a big difference to have a little bit of mass to just to stay healthy, to get healthy. all that stuff. And those concepts are all related.
Yeah. And I think that there's like, I don't know, what do you think about addressing the myth of, oh, if you lift as a pitcher, you're going to get really tight and you're not gonna move well. You're gonna be too bulky and you're not gonna move. You're not gonna be athletic anymore.
Yeah, I mean, like, and not just like if you think about it through theory, like that doesn't make sense. You have to be strong to be able to move fast and move well and throw hard and be competitive. But the research doesn't support it either. I mean, so there's plenty of research on it, and this is one thing that we harp on a lot as PTs. So pretty much all the research points to actually stretching doesn't really work. Like it doesn't really make much of a difference in compared to lifting. They actually research finds that if you lift through full range of motion, controlled full range of motion, that's actually better at increasing range of motion and increasing your flexibility than static stretching. Static stretching, it doesn't like maybe acutely. So like right after you do the static stretch, you're going to increase your range of motion, your flexibility. But long term, it makes no difference, none at all, zero. But if you lift, strengthen through full range of motion in a controlled manner, especially eccentric exercises, long term, what you're doing is those muscles, they have all these like their building blocks are kind of in series. They're all like lined up. You actually get more of them in series, in length, in your muscle. So your muscle actually changes its structure to allow itself to get longer. As opposed to with static stretching, you're just pulling the muscle apart. You're not changing the structure of the muscle. But when you lift through full range of motion in a controlled manner, you're actually changing the structure of the muscle to not only be able to get be longer, but what that does, because you have more of those built blocks, like those building blocks of the muscle, sarcomeres in series, the muscle's actually able to contract faster and you're able to have more power. So, lifting, like it's a big part. Strengthening is a huge part of everything when it comes to that. Of course, if you lift super heavy through partial range of motion and you're just like going way too much weight than you can handle and you're barely moving and like, yeah, you're probably going to get tight like that because now you're strengthening in not much of a range of motion, and the range of motion that you're ignoring, that you're neglecting, your body saying, oh, I don't feel comfortable there, I'm going to get rid of that. But if
Yeah.
you do it the right way, you're gaining range of motion from that. So that argument to me, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, none of the research supports it.
Yeah. I mean, we do have some guys who do swear by, aspects of static stretching. Like, for example, our hardest thrower up at Westmont, Sean Youngerman, up to 97, he swears by hip mobility, just doing like, I know some of it's dynamic stretching, some of it's, cars, just,
And dynamic stretching, cars, that's totally different because that's
yeah.
all active, and cars are actually pretty difficult. If you do them right, they're pretty damn hard.
Yeah.
And so like that stuff, like totally helpful. I think that's great. It's the static stretching that you're just like sitting there, like barely struggling. You're just essentially pulling on the muscle, which not that that doesn't have a place. Like if you want to incorporate that into your warm up because you feel that it makes a difference and it helps you, like great. If something helps you, it helps you. But when it comes to like long term improvement of our skills and improvement of like our body's capacity, it doesn't really. It's not necessarily the answer. Everything
No.
has a place. Like I'm
Yeah.
not saying get rid of
Yeah.
static stretching. It's the devil. It doesn't work. Don't incorporate it into your warm up. There could totally be a place for it. I love dynamic stretching. I love so cars. I think that's great. It's the static stretching that I'm like, all right, if your goal is to gain range of motion long term, static stretching necessarily isn't the answer. Not that it doesn't have a purpose, but that's not the answer to that goal.
Yeah. And what I was saying, yeah, that's a big point I was harping on. Was like Sean swears by it. He's a little bit more of like a tight moving type guy. I know he does incorporate a fair amount of some static stretching. I don't think he holds it in like that, prescribed time of like 2 by 30, 1 by 60, whatever it is. Like I know he'll hit like some pigeon stretches, but I mean I've seen him hit it for like 10 seconds and he just moves on because I think
Yeah.
it's like a feel thing for him. But I also have plenty of athletes who are like, I hate stretching. I'm not going to do it. And some of the stuff that we do with them is just a lot of exploratory movement. where it'll just be like flow lunges, flow, crawling, all sorts of stuff like that. And when you're doing stuff like when you're doing crawling, when you're doing flow lunges, like everyone knows lunges are going to open up some range of motion, like especially if you're going in different directions where you're crossing over, kind of like a curtsy lunge into like a regular reverse lunge or forward lunge. Like you're going to open up some of the hips. And then a lot of the cool stuff about the crawling is, not only are you also like indirectly hitting some mid trap, low trap strengthening, but you're also going to be hitting some spinal waves doing stuff like that. You can
Yeah,
open
you're just getting an
motion.
exploring range of motion. Yeah, exploring range
Yeah.
of motion, get your body going. And I would say, like, when it comes to, if we're talking specifically about like a warm up, like, is the goal to gain range of motion? I would argue not really. Like, the goal
Yeah.
of warm up is to get your blood flowing, to start getting some activation of the muscles, and just start getting things moving so that you're in a good place where you're prepared to move fast and compete and produce force. It's not necessarily, I wouldn't say, gain range of motion. Although some people like sometimes like confuse that, or they believe that, or they want to get more range of motion. It's not necessarily what's happening. For me is the goal of a warm up. The goal of a warm up is to get my body prepared to move fast.
Yeah.
And some of that stuff it works. Like if you're getting blood flow, and you're starting to warm up the muscles and they're starting to get moving and all that, like that works. I mean, for me, warm ups can be all kinds of things, and they can be they can look all kinds of different shapes and sizes. When I was playing, I had a very short warm up because a huge part of my warm up was just hitting fungo to our infielders pregame. And for me, I was starting to get moving. Like I thought that was great because I was rotating. I was rotating fast. I was getting the muscles active. I was getting blood flow. I was learning how to build tension in that hip to shoulder separation. And I was getting all activated. So my warm up was very short, very concise. I didn't need much because that was a big part of it. Other guys might have more long, slow paced, drawn out warm ups, and that works great for them. And they look totally different. And it's a totally different set of exercises. Like again, a warm up could look a million different ways as long as it gets to the goal of preparing you to move fast,
Yeah.
compete, and do it in a safe way.
Yeah. I mean, for me, when I hear warm up, cars are good for seeing what range of motion maybe you're working with that day, but I just think it's about priming whatever's about to move. Like if let's say like it's only a lift day, and we're hitting lower body or whatever. I'm trying to prime my glutes, hammies, calves, like whatever it is. I'm trying to prime that in as little amount of time as possible to hit as much work as possible because I don't want to fatigue it at the same time. And I think that's some guys do get fatigued out, or if they over statically stretch, they get that feeling of like, ooh, I'm tight again. That's just because they,
power if you're static. So research shows that with static stretching, performance actually dips if you warm up with more static stretching, because you lose muscle power production, which is interesting. And I think there's, obviously like it depends on the dosage. If you're doing a ton of static stretching, I can see where that would be a big problem. If you have just like a short, quick, static stretching routine that you're just like boom, 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 you're not getting too deep into it. You're just trying to get some blood flow and the muscles feeling good. Like I could see where that probably wouldn't have the same effect and it could be beneficial. But yeah, power production is a big part of it. And if you're just sitting there stretching, cranking on stuff for a super long time, that's something that the research also shows is like,
yeah,
you lose power production.
100%. I think it's important to understand just how different everybody's body is and different everybody moves too. It's like we don't want to fit anyone into one box. I mean, if we look at some of the best pitchers of all time, I mean, how many of them really move the exact same? Some of them have some similar features for sure,
Yeah,
but
everybody moves differently. And at the end of the day, like when I try to think about, especially with like throwing mechanics, I think more about how they're moving the energy up the chain into the baseball. And so what that for me is like, okay, we have to create tension with every moving piece and get that energy up, right? So like for some guys are tighter movers than others. Like when you see a guy like let's say Fernando Rodney, pretty tight mover, he doesn't get a ton of separation. He's not super flexible. He's not like, and that's fine because he's creating tension. That's all that matters. You look at Jacob deGrom. You can tell, pretty lanky guy, pretty mobile guy, and he gets a ton of separation. All his moving parts getting a lot of like separation, right? He's getting into some deep ranges of motion. Why? Because he has to get into those deep ranges of motions to create tension. Depends on the guy. Like some guys, they don't have to get into super deep range of motion to create tension, and that's fine. Like if they're creating tension and moving energy up the chain, that's all that matters. If the performance is there, who the hell cares how much range of motion they're getting, as long as they're getting to the point where they're able to create tension. That's all that matters.
Yeah, exactly. I think that would lead into a good segment of like, what do we try and teach our athletes? Like,
Yeah.
So personally for me, like the biggest thing I try and teach them is just like general athleticism, like trying to get good feel. Because I mean, we live in a baseball world where everything is like chasing velocity, and it feels like I'm probably beating a dead horse at this point now with how much I've talked about this topic. But the biggest thing that I think helps guys chase velocity truly is becoming a better mover. And that's another big reason that I've added like on conditioning or recovery days. I'm like, dude, go play a pickup sport, go play rec. Like if you want to hop on the bike for 30 minutes, that's cool. That's dope. Like get your heart rate up. But yeah, but there's a reason I didn't get rid of the basketball net down there near the mounds. Cause it's like, dude, if you're going to go get some blood flow in, you might as well be super athletic doing it. And also let's just have some fun doing it.
Yeah.
Cause I also think, yeah, and I can tell you from experience working up at the high school too. When we do conditioning, every time I get a chance, I try and make it a game. I told the boys one time, I tricked them. I was like, bring a towel. I made them think that we were going to do some towel drill that day. And they just had to put it in the back of their shorts. And it just became games where they had to, pull the towel out from somebody because, we didn't have flags or anything like that. And I'll tell you this, guys, probably try way harder. Almost every time guys are trying so much harder than even if we're just like, hey, today we got straight sprints. If I turn that into a game, something where there's competition, they move so much better. And you'll see them explore different ways of moving and they don't complain. They don't complain about conditioning at that point.
They want to do it more because they're competing.
Yeah.
They want to win,
And I think I used to really subscribe. Yeah, I used to really subscribe into the thought process of like, training should not be fun. Training attacks your weaknesses. And yeah, like there is some truth to that. Like training shouldn't be all about what you're really good at. Like if you're a really freaking good, like if you're a great squatter, we're not going to spend a lot of time on that. But like at the same time, we do need to make things at least interesting. If you're walking in the weight room every day, or you're walking down to doing your throwing drills every day and you're just like, oh my God, this sucks. Like you're not going to get anything out of that because your attitude going in already sucks.
Not even focused.
Yeah. You don't have the same focus that you would if you were doing the things that you're really good at. Yeah. You have to have at least a similar amount of focus to that. I mean, if we're only attacking our strengths, we're not getting better. But also if we don't at least try and hit our strengths once in a while, we're not going to get better either because that's what we're good at.
That kind of brings up the thought of like, what's our mindset, not just in our training, but when we're competing and they bleed into each other. It's like, what do you bring into the field every day? Like,
yeah,
I had the privilege of being able to work with Shane Bieber this spring when I was with the Guards, and the level of focus that guy brings. I mean, I got to see him pre TJ and post TJ. And pre TJ when he was just getting ready for the season, like there was an aura about the way that he carried himself in his catch play, the simple things in his pens. Like there was a purpose with everything. Every move he made, everything he did, there was a purpose. It was focused. It was simple. It was manageable. He wasn't overthinking anything. He was just locked in on what he needed to do, and he was completing the task. And if there was a bad pitch, he missed a spot, whatever. It was very focused. It was very controlled. The emotion stayed the same, but you could tell it was just like, all right, that was the result. This is the adjustment I need to make. Back to it. boom, doesn't miss. And like that's what guys need to bring every day is like you're focused, your emotions stay the same, you're locked in, everything has a purpose. Between throws, between exercises, whatever, you can like BS, talk crap, whatever, hang out, and have a good time with the people around you. Because ultimately, that's what baseball's about, is having fun with the people around you. And when it's time to make a throw, when it's time to complete an exercise, knock out a set, you're locked in, and at that point, the blinders come on and you're focused, you're, tunnel vision, and you're just locked in on the task at hand. And that's a skill, is being able to kind of flip the switch, turn it on, turn it off, because it's a problem when you can't turn it on, but it's also a problem when you can't turn it off. Because then you get burned out. You're sometimes getting domed up, overthinking, whatever. You got to be able to turn it on and turn it off. And that brings up, and we could talk about it now. We could talk about it later, but also, I think the biggest lesson I learned in my last year of playing ball was learning how to be my own person and not be tied into I am Alex, the baseball player, but being I am Alex, who does all these awesome things, but I also happen to be a baseball player. I guess for me, that made a big difference in my performance and my ability.
I put a post out on that not that long ago too. I think I just talked about the dangers of putting your identity into one thing. And you and me, obviously, these could go down different routes, but you and me are both Christians. So, one of the things that we've talked about before is just we put our identity in Christ. But I think people who, if they're not down that road, I mean, that's them.
If I'm putting something like, I think, and the way I look at it, because it's also not, I don't want to go into it and be like, oh, baseball doesn't matter, and then I'm like not even competing and whatever, right? Like, I don't want to give that impression either. But my entire time, like my entire life growing up, my identity was in baseball, and you can make the case that my identity kind of still is in baseball, because it's really all I think about and all I do and all I want to do. Not totally, but it's a big part of my life. But I don't see myself as like, oh, if I don't have baseball, I have nothing. And my last year of my baseball career was the best year of my baseball career. And I would attribute it to the fact that I wasn't so stressed about losing my career. My entire life, I was gripping for dear life. My knuckles were white as hell, because I was like, I don't want to lose this game. I don't want to stop playing. I need to be a professional baseball player. And I was so focused on the outcome of my performance that I was like completely, I guess like burning myself out. And it was in college, it was always the same story. I'd have a great start to the season. Mid-season, I'd start to tire out a little bit. I'd have a bad outing. I'd dome myself up, but the rest of the year wasn't good. And it wasn't until my last year, my fourth year was the COVID year. So halfway through the year, I had a great start to the year. Halfway through the year, got banged. But I remember going into that off season, like so stressed about, this is my last year, my last chance to get the pro ball, to get myself good enough, to get the velo I need, to get the performance I need. And I think that was an extended period of time outside of the game. I learned how, and I also had great mentors from our coaches at the time. So my fourth year was our first year with those new coaches. They were awesome. When I got to Loyola, we had a really bad team environment. And by the time I finished, we had an awesome team environment. We're a powerhouse organization, about powerhouse, clubhouse team. Did a great job turning that around. And I think we had great mentors from our coaches. So I kind of had them kind of feeding me this as well. But I learned how to like enjoy life and enjoy other things and have interests, so that and this is where I kind of get to, it is like, so I could learn how to flip off the switch, because that was my problem. I didn't know how to flip off the switch. The switch was always on. If I wasn't playing ball, I was still thinking about ball. And when I was able to flip it off and find other interests and do other things and decompress, that's when I was able to then go out to the field, enjoy the game, enjoy the competition. I was still a fierce competitor. I was still like, every single pitch was personal, and I was going to steal your masculinity away from you as a hitter. And I was coming after your throat. Like, I was going to kill you, and I was locked in. But I wasn't so focused on my performance I was focused on, competing. I wasn't so focused on if I don't do well, if I don't get my velo up, if I don't, shove here, I'm going to lose my career. I was just focused on, I love this game. I love to compete. I love to win. I'm going to beat you. This is a one-on-one competition. I'm going to beat you. And I was able to just focus on that. And because of that, I didn't burn out and I was peaking in the playoffs. And I feel
Yeah.
like that mindset makes such a difference. And it's something that a lot of guys struggle with or don't know how to find or don't even know that they need to find it. Is learn how to flip off the switch so that when you do turn on the switch, you can do it at 100% and you can just focus on what's important, and that is competing, and not all this outside noise that kind of comes from, trying to make the next level and trying to, do all that. Because at that point, everything comes. And then I started seeing velo jumps. So my body felt better. My performance was a lot better. And I had the best year of my career. That's a big part of it. That was a big lesson that I learned. Because my whole life I was so focused on like, I need this game that I feel like it hindered me a little bit. And it, I'm glad that I'm so passionate about baseball because it led me to learn everything that I learned, and now I can pass that down. But that passion doesn't have to be limiting in that way. You can have that passion, but also still be able to flip off the switch when you don't need it on all the time.
Yeah. And I think that's another thing for young kids is just like everything we were the start of that era where things got specialized. So everything's even more specialized now. I think it's hard for kids to not put their identity into the game. And a lot of these kids right now who are juniors, seniors, even the sophomores, they experienced the COVID lockdowns like everybody else, and they weren't able to really go out there and have buddies and have social lives and things like that. And it just turned them into baseball players only. They put so much of their identity into it. And again, there has to be a level of obsession to be good at something. Like you really do have to have an obsession, which is why I think like you see people who are like former addicts who become businessmen, businesswomen. They're really good at business because they are, when they want something, they will do everything humanly possible to go get that thing.
Yeah.
So there is an aspect of hyper focus, but I do think COVID actually did hurt a lot of these kids in that aspect because they had one thing to focus on, and that was getting back on the field because they were stuck inside. But for me, it was very dangerous because at one point I got sick. Like I said earlier, I got really, really sick and I couldn't play baseball, and I was nobody without baseball in my mind. I ruined some relationships and friendships at the time doing that. And then, I had just a lot of like self-confidence issues when I going into my senior year of college where baseball was my identity. I had no idea what to do with myself when I thought about quitting. I was just like, how is this going to work? And I still knew that I wanted to coach. It was just like, how am I going to be a coach if I knew I quit this year? And it's like, I don't think I wanted to quit because I hated baseball. I think it's just that baseball wasn't going so well for me and it became my identity. Therefore, life wasn't going so well for me when it couldn't have been further from the truth. Like I've got such a fortunate situation in my life, and I still continue to have that. But when you make this game your identity, like that's rough because this is not your job. It's not your job. It's not your job until somebody pays you to be there.
It's a failure. It's a failure. It's a game of failure, right? So like, if you're basing how you feel off of how you're doing in the sport, you're gonna feel horrible most of the time. Like, you gotta have that. You have to be able to turn the page, especially as a pitcher. You have to be able to turn the page. Forget the things that you don't need to bring with you. Remember the things that the lessons that you need to bring from whatever bad outing you had, and move forward with the same competitive mindset. And kind of let go. Like you have to have that as a pitcher. As a baseball player.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Baseball player in general. I think, good hitters get themselves out a lot, like a lot. But I think that just is such a like hard thing for people to turn off. And I think that, obviously parents feed into that a little bit, friends feed into that, coaches feed into that. I would never harp on a kid to like, oh my God, if you're not this way, if you're not that way, if you're not this obsessed, you are never going to make it in the sport. It's like, dude, I know kids who genuinely believe that they suck and they are really good. And I think that's a big reason it helps. In the long run, is it going to help them? I'm not sure. They may have to figure out a way to flip a switch on. But it's a decent starting point in terms of not being so obsessed with it. And I think that's, a big quality amongst the really good athletes that we have. And this was another thing that I put a post out on not that long ago, is there are really good athletes. They know that they're good, but they do not believe that they are great. They don't believe that they're the best guy in the room. They know that they have things to improve on. A lot of the athletes that I've worked with before, who they think that they're, this, that, and everything, like, they think that they're great.
Yeah. Because then there's no like desire to get better. At that point, then it's like, oh, I'm the best guy here. If I just show up, I'm going to beat you. And in high school, a lot of times that's the case. Some of the best pitchers I played with in high school, or played against in high school, nothing came of their careers because they thought they were just going to show up to college and dominate because that's what they did in high school. And it didn't work that way. And when it came time to get better, they didn't know how,
You know what's hilarious to me? This is hilarious, is those guys who always think that they're the best never, ever want to face the guys that they want to play with when they get in college. When we go to those tournaments and everything, oh my, like, dude, they fucking piss their pants over the fact that they're going to face someone who throws over 85. I don't want to face that guy. It's like, oh, I thought you were the best. I thought you were the best in the world. It's like, no, you didn't want to face that guy because you're not a bulldog, you're a puppy dog. And that's that mindset that they feed. And I don't know if it's an ego thing. It could be whatever, but
they don't
that's a
want to
big
fail.
thing.
They can't come to terms with the fact that they might not be as good as they think that they are. And
Yeah.
I think just, to kind of like bring it back to like kind of the experience I had growing up. And this is something I did want to, talk about, on the pod when I was thinking about it over the previous few days, is like, throughout my career, kind of growing up, because I did always suck. Like I was always bad. I was always undersized. I always threw slow. I was a bad hitter. When
I
I was
just love how you say I always sucked. That's the
yeah,
best.
I wasn't good. Like in all reality, I was not good. I look back and I was just a bad player. Every single level I got to, I barely got there. And I remember when I got to high school, I went to one of the best baseball programs in Miami, Christopher Columbus High School, where we always have a good team. We always have dudes. And I remember when I got there my freshman year, the only person that really believed in me was my dad, my stepdad. He was the only person that said like, all right, yeah, everything that you say you're going to do it. And that's because I was a hard worker and he did believe in me. He knew my mindset. He was there with me, at the cages, on the field, playing catch with me hours on end. But like even a lot of my family was like, oh, like why don't you transfer to this other high school that is not as good of a program? Like no, like
Yeah.
virtually nobody believed that I was going to make the freshman high school team. Then JV came around. Virtually nobody believed that I was going to make the JV high school team. And then my junior year came around. It was time to make varsity. I remember we were waiting for so I was waiting. So we had like a fall ball exit meetings. That's basically when our coach said whether we made the team or not for spring. And I remember we were all waiting outside of the clubhouse and we were all waiting to go into his office where we'd kind of have that talk. And I was the last guy who went in because I was like terrified that I was pretty sure that I was going to get cut. And I was like, all right, let me extend my career as long as I can. I remember I walked into that room and the first words he told me it's burned into my brain. I'll never forget it. I can see it like if it was yesterday. All the coaches were sitting around. And our head coach tells me, you're going to be the 25 man on my 25th man on my 25 man. You're going to be the 25th man on my 25 man roster. You're going to pitch 0 innings this year. Are you okay with that? And I was like, yeah, like in my head, I'm like, I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to get better. And I'm going to earn some innings. I pitched 0 innings that year. But he said, you're on this team because you're the hardest worker I've ever had. And you have a passion for this game and you know this game better than anybody else on the team. And you're a good asset to our team and our clubhouse. And I remember, that's burned into my brain. I'll never forget it. And then the coach just said some nice things about me. They said, some good things about my work ethic, my passion, my knowledge of the game, stuff like that, which was nice to hear. But at the end of the day, it was like, all right, you're challenging me. I'm going to pitch 0 innings this year. I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to get good. Pitch 0 innings that year. But then my senior year came around. I was able to contribute to the team. We won a state title my junior year. We were state runner-ups my senior year. So I got to contribute to a good program my senior year. And then college came around, and nobody believed I was going to play college baseball. I ended up playing at a small NAIA school. I barely made it to that level. Played at a really I got there. It was a really, really, really crappy program with a really horrible culture, a lot of issues. My class was like the first class that really wanted to change things. And then the class right below me was the first class that it was like everybody really wanted to change things. And then my fourth year, we got a new head coach, new assistant coach. Culture completely changed. He's one of the best. I think he's the best college coach in baseball. He's an NAIA warrior. He doesn't want to go D1. He loves the NAIA. He played NAIA. He's coached his whole career in NAIA. And I think he's one of only like 2 or 3 coaches that have taken multiple different programs to the NAIA World Series. And immediately, yeah, he's a beast. And immediately he changed our program culture, like from one day to the next, and our ability to win. And I was able to contribute big time at the end of my career because I worked hard and I was able to change, it wasn't until my last couple of years of college baseball that I could say I was good. But my entire career, I was barely making it to the next level. But the point I want to make is that the reason why I was still able to compete, because my entire career, even at the end, I was outperforming my ability, was because off of the field, when I was training, I was realistic with myself. I knew that I wasn't good and I knew I needed to get a hell of a lot better. But in my mind, when I went out there to compete, I was the best player there. And I had unrealistic expectations for my future. Not unrealistic. I had what other people thought was delusional expectations for my career, which I ended up meeting the expectations I held for myself. And that was when I was out there, I remember in high school, when I was out there training so I could get better and win a job, I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm going to take the job of the guy that's just ahead of me. I'm going to win a job, a reliable spot in the bullpen. It was like, I was training. I was like, I'm going to be the ace. This guy that's the ace, Christopher Coipel was his name my junior year. My senior year, Andy Arguez, great dudes. And they were freaking beasts of pitchers. But I remember, like, in my head when I was training, I was thinking, I'm taking their job. And then when I got to college, it was like, I'm going to be the ace, even though I was like just trying to like barely winning a spot in the pen. It was like, I'm going to be the ace. And then, came to my senior year and like all that kind of came to fruition and I was able to get a lot better. A lot of it was that I worked hard. A lot of it was that I started to learn what I needed to work on, like the actual knowledge of what I needed to work on. It was when I started to see the fruits, started asking, why I'm doing what I'm doing instead of just what to do. More like quick, this is the drill that's going to get you velo, but like, okay, what is going on in my body and what is going to be what I need specifically. But that mindset made a huge difference and why I was able to outperform my ability and keep getting to the next level is because when I was training, I knew that I needed to train my butt off just to barely survive. I was very aware of what everybody thought of my ability and that everybody thought I sucked. But I was also in my own head thinking, no, my expectations for my career are that I'm going to be a Hall of Fame professional baseball player. I'm going to be the best player on this program. I'm on this team that I'm on currently. Like I know I can do these things. I just have to put in the work to do them. And I think that fueled a lot of my work ethic. And it fueled the chip on my shoulder I had on the field because every single person in that stadium, not just on the field, but everybody in the stadium, the coaches, the fans, everything, I was like, I know that I have this potential and I'm going to prove you wrong. And I would go out there with my freaking 70 poo fastball, 80 poo fastball and pitch out there like I threw 105 and I had freaking, fire coming out of my nose. And at the end of the day, like part of that is I had a lot of confidence and confidence, wins you games and gets you to perform. But also because I believed in myself so much, I was able to go out there with the kind of that bulldog aura, and that makes hitters uncomfortable. And it also allowed me to focus very well, and if you have that mindset of what your potential is, unlimited, but you're also aware of where you currently are, but you have the confidence in your potential, not the confidence in where you're currently at. Because I wasn't sitting there thinking to myself, oh, I'm better than everybody here. Screw what everybody thinks, screw their stuff. I know I'm better than what they think I am, because I knew I wasn't good. But I knew what my potential was. And so it fueled my work ethic. It fueled my competitive nature. It fueled my ability to outperform my ability. And I think that's something that a lot of guys can learn from and like take with them. And what the best have is like, they know what their potential is, but they also know where they currently are and that they're not at where their potential is. All right. Because the guys think that they're the best and they're not thinking about how good they can get, but they're like, oh, I'm already the best pitcher in high school baseball, or I'm the best pitcher, or this, or I should be getting these opportunities because I'm this good and these other people don't think I'm that good. Like that doesn't, there's no help there. But if
They're going
you
to get you
know
anywhere.
where you're at, that
Yeah.
would
It's not going to get you anywhere either.
Yeah.
If you've got that's as close as you can get to a victim mentality without saying you're a victim. I deserve this. You don't deserve
that's a victim
anything.
mentality right there. Yeah. But if you know where your potential is and understand that everything is earned, and even if it's true that you're not getting the opportunities that you deserve, that doesn't, like, you still have to have the mindset of, who the hell cares what cards I've been given? I'm going to earn that. And I remember having conversations with people, arguing with my family and whatever, where they were trying to convince me, like, transfer here, give yourself an opportunity. It was like, no, I am going to earn that. I don't care where I stand now. I'm going to earn the opportunity, even if there's all these guys ahead of me, even if nobody believes in me, even if the coach, doesn't believe that I can be the guy and is already biased against me. Like, I'm going to earn it, because I'm going to be so obviously competitive and so obviously hardworking and so obviously overperforming my ability that I don't give him a choice, that I'm going to earn. It's so obvious that I've earned a job and an opportunity.
You know what, too? It's where guys come out with that, I don't play because coach hates me. It's like, dude, I've witnessed firsthand at the high school, coaches play people they do not like all the time. And then I've witnessed firsthand where great players leave that program, and the coaches, they'll talk before the game. Oh, I'm so thankful that guy's in college now. It's like, no one ever says that about the fucking studs, bro. Like, if you're that good, you're gonna play. Yeah, there are probably maybe 0.1 something % of cases where a coach will hold a vendetta so much that they'll keep the best player off the field. Now, I think there's merit to that. Like, I personally would rather lose with a lot of good quality people than win with assholes. Yeah. But at the end of the day, when you have that mentality of like, oh, coach doesn't like me, it's like, if I go look at your roster, I can guarantee you that you don't deserve to be in the spot that you're at least saying you are. Yeah. More than likely.
Yeah. And I'll say too, like, to that, don't be that asshole. Don't be that guy. Like, don't be the guy that nobody likes. Don't be the cancer on the team, because even if you are nasty, like, one, yeah, sure, maybe at the level you're at, you'll still get the opportunities because you're that good. I've witnessed firsthand in pro ball, at least with the Guardians, they're an organization that they really take a lot of pride in the type of people that they have in their org, the type of players that they bring in. They do a lot of betting on people's personalities, who they are off the field. Like, that's a big deal in pro ball, at least with the Guardians. Like, they're not going to draft, like, your personality. It's going to take a hit if you don't have a good personality. If you're a total asshole, or you're not locked in on your stuff, like, not only is that going to hurt you because guys aren't going to want you in your org, but that hurts your projectability, because guys who act that way don't get better at that level. It is hard to play pro ball. Like, the best of the best get to pro ball and they don't make it to the bigs, because you're not going to make it to the bigs if you're a total a-hole and you don't know how to take care of your stuff. And obviously there are guys that are just freaks, but it makes it a lot harder. And the other point I want to make on that is, like, teams that win, that truly win, they aren't comprised of a team of assholes. Their like culture makes such a difference in how your team does on the field. I mean, I was able to witness it in college, where I got to a program that had a terrible culture and left with probably the best culture I've ever been a part of in my life. And I won a state title in college. I mean, in high school. I won, I was state runner up in high school. In that program, I got to see what a winning culture is like. And it's a culture of a bunch of brothers who will die for each other. It's a culture of a bunch of guys. And in high school, we had some guys that were assholes, but not in a way that everybody hated them, in a way that they had a chip on their shoulder, that they were arrogant and they were going to beat you. And they still worked hard.
Yeah.
But it was like we were close. We were brothers. We were going to die for each other on that field. And we had guys that were a-holes, but they were a-holes in the way that it was like, oh, I'm tired of this game. I want to go home. We're tied right now in extra innings. I'm going to go out there and end this game. And then they go out there, and the first pitch they hit a walk-off bomb. Like, I witnessed that my junior year. Dominic Reyes looks in while he's in the batter's box, he's on deck. Turns over to the dugout and goes, I'm tired of this fucking game. I want to go home. First pitch, bomb, walk off. And he was that kind of guy. He was arrogant. He knew that he was good. He was an a-hole in a good way, but he wasn't an a-hole in that people didn't like him. And like, if you are an a-hole that people don't like you, that you're, partying, you're not focused, you're whatever, like, you're not going to win like that. Your culture is going to suffer. I got to college. I was in New Orleans. We had a drinking culture. We had a big problem where our team, more than half the guys did not give a shit if we won or not. It was a bad culture. And we lost a lot of games. We weren't good. We had some talent. Then my senior year comes around, my fourth year. I played 5 years. We got a new head coach in. The culture starts to shift. We didn't get a ton of new talent. We weren't much of a different team. And we went out there and we were one of the best teams in the country from the get-go because our culture was different, because we weeded out the guys that were a-holes. And some of those guys were good. And we got rid of them because they weren't contributing to our culture. And when you have a bunch of brothers pulling in the same direction, all of a sudden guys start to perform better. So don't be that guy that detracts from the culture. Don't be that a-hole that makes the team worse, not because of your ability, but because you're making a hostile environment where guys don't care if they win because they don't care about the team. But when a guy goes out there for an at-bat and they love every single person in that dugout and they want to, it just adds a little more where they want to come through for their brothers. They would die for their brothers. It's like, all right, you know what? I'm going to put the team ahead of me. I don't need to, show off here, hit a bomb, hit a double. I'm locked in as hell because I just need to get on base because my brother behind me is going to be able to, I want to give him the opportunity to be the hero or make another step or just keep passing the baton. And that comes from culture, and that comes from yourself. Am I an a-hole? Am I detracting from this culture? Or am I locked in on, on doing things right? And do I love my brothers? You know what I mean? That is a huge part of that. And talking with our head coach in college, and then what I've heard, because now one of my best friends, who's my catcher at the time, is now their assistant coach. And we won a lot of games with probably not the most talented team. I mean, we ended up being, I think, at one point, going into the regional, we were the 8th ranked team in the country. We hosted a regional. We were the 1 seed in the regional, which is, I think now it's called the NAI opening round, which is like the first round of the national championship. And so, like, the big thing that he always says about that team is that it was just a really special group of guys. And it was. I got to be a part of it. It was just a really special group of guys. We all loved each other. We all cared. We were a smart group of guys. We handled things off the field just as well as we handled things on the field. There were no problems,
And dude, I think that speaks into the way that our fearless culture is, because you and me have both played in good and bad cultures. For instance, when I was at North Central College, there was a saying that was the drinking team has a baseball problem,
exactly
which is, yeah,
that's exactly what we used to say. It was a huge problem.
And one of the coolest things that we've implemented into that culture was like, we will not train people who are dicks, no matter how good you are. Like, I will go through people's social media. I'll ask people if they know this person about that. I've turned down applicants multiple times because I've found out the way that they treat people off the field.
Themselves, ultimately.
Yeah. And I think that one of the coolest things this year that we've had was the Ty and Dylan matchup. And the reason I think that was so cool was because they're on rival teams, rival schools. They were scheduled to pitch against each other on the last game of the year for both of them, the last season game of the year before playoffs. And for weeks, months leading up to that, they didn't give a single shit about the games that were coming up. They just wanted to face each other so bad. And Dylan's having the year of his life. He is mowing people down. I mean, he had a .43 ERA this year. He set the strikeout record at his high school. Just mowed teams down. And Ty had been coming off of injury the year before. He got 2 starts. He had 8 innings, and he hurt his UCL, and he came back. He bounced back. And they were scheduled to pitch against each other from like the beginning. And that was like the coolest thing to see firsthand, on-field view as the pitching coach at Oaks. And for those of you who don't know, Ty is my little brother. So he was on that team, and I was calling pitches for him that game, and they just went toe-to-toe, shot for shot with each other that game, and Dylan threw a one-hitter based on just the miscommunication in the infield, which was so he should have had a no-hitter. They both went 7 innings, one-run game, and I think that was the coolest highlight of this spring for Fearless guys, was that matchup, because a lot of other guys came out to watch that game too. And there are Fearless guys on both of those teams too that were, kind of pulling for each other at the same time. Like they wanted to beat each other, but they also wanted to see each other do well. It wasn't like, I want to see you like give up 8 bombs. Like,
I was like, I want the best matchup possible. I want you to shove so that I can shove and we can have a real matchup. I want you at your best and see if me at my best is better than you at your best. And I think,
exactly.
I think one of the things that makes that so special too is that they're both incredible guys and they're both super hard workers, and they train
together all off season too. They would come in at the same time. I can remember in February, right when the schedules got released, like early, maybe even in January, when they were lifting, it was like, we are scheduled to pitch against each other. Let's fucking go. Like, it was like the coolest, and they were both saying, the same thing. I want to face your best. I don't want you to suck. Like, and it's not, it's two things. It's I don't want you to suck because you're my training partner. I want the best for you. But it's also like, I want to go against you. I don't want to go against the version of you that's
versus guys me at my best.
Yeah, I don't want to go against the version of guys that's giving up hits. It's like, I want to go against the version that is mowing lineups down. And that's exactly what happened.
Just 2 dudes shoving. It was. Yeah. I remember that, man. That was special. It was special.
I think that was like an hour and a half long game. It was just like, boom, shot for shot, toe for toe. I can
love, man. That's what I love about our culture is like, you just have we have a lot of really good dudes that compete their butts off. And they care about each other, man. It's not just a bunch of guys training. It's a bunch of brothers training. And to kind of go off of what you said with, the personalities we want to bring in and how we kind of vet our guys, like, that doesn't mean that we only want guys that are perfect and don't have issues. And we also take a lot of pride in mentoring guys, right? So
100%.
We want to see a willingness and an ability to be mentored. Like we want to be able to mold boys into men, and we want to be able to mold these young men to go out and be great societies or great additions to society. We don't want to send a bunch of a-holes into the world. That doesn't mean that we're not going to take a guy that needs molding. And we care a lot about that. We care a lot about molding our guys. But if a guy is a lost cause and they just have a ton of issues that we hear from multiple people and we've experienced ourselves, at the end of the day, we care a lot about our culture. We don't want to bring people into our culture that are going to ruin it for the rest of the guys.
Yeah, no. And I think that's a big thing is like, I don't want to coach guys like that. I know for a fact guys do not want to train with people like that. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those things where I think that the most pride I have in Fearless comes from the people that compose it, the people that make it up, because there is no Fearless without the athletes, right? And I have had no athletes so far that I haven't dropped, right? I have had cases of guys where I've unfortunately had to kick them out and say like, this isn't working. I haven't had a single case where, someone's complained that this person is a low quality dude. They're not, a high character type of person. And it's been really cool to watch guys grow and mold and, become their own man too. Because the unfortunate thing with young men now as well is I think that nobody believes in anybody anymore, like including parents sometimes. Is we might be the only voice in their life saying, like, you could play college baseball. We might be the only voice in their life saying you could play JV baseball.
No.
Like, that's the unfortunate thing is everything has become so competitive. And I can't, again, I'm not a parent yet, but I can't blame a parent for not wanting to see their son go through heartbreak of like, oh my God, I know he loves this game so much, but if he goes out there, he's going to break his heart because he's going to fail. And it's like, let him fail. If he
Failure is
does,
hard, man. It's such a um a growth opportunity for people. Failure is such an important part of life. Like
yeah,
kids need to learn how to fail from a young age because failure, like at the end of the day, right? Like I don't look at failure as like the end of anything. Like it's the
no,
beginning of learning. Failure is the beginning of learning, what you need to do to be better in the future. And if you never fail, you're never going to be better. And if you never fail, you're going to create a mindset for yourself. You're going to end up a total a-hole, like we were talking about. You're going to think that you're,
yeah,
perfect and, there's nothing that you can do wrong and everything you do is going to turn to gold. Or you're never going to have a work ethic because the first time you do start to fail, because in the real world, you can't get away from failure. You're going to be like, oh, I've never experienced this before. And it's going to totally decimate you, you know?
Now, let me ask you a question as the guy who is, you've been around so much rehab at, the high level now. Do you think that guys come back after they've been injured? Do you think they come back with, and I think everyone's going to know the answer to this, but do they come back a different person?
Totally. Totally. And I'll talk about kind of some of the fruits of it is like, I think part of it, especially, some guys go into rehab and because it depends. Like some guys are different than others. Some guys go into rehab and they going into it, they don't really have a routine. They're not kind of locked in. They haven't faced as much adversity. And like, so the practical sense, they learn how to build a very strict routine. They learn a lot of things about their body. They learn how to train better. They learn how to take care of themselves. And then they come back better in that sense that they know how to have a routine. They know how to, what their body needs. They learn a lot about themselves. They learn a lot about their training. They learn a lot about their body. Because that experience, you're learning, totally new stuff every single day. But from the mindset part of it, which I think is the hardest part of rehab, is where your mental is, the psychological part of it. And a cool part about being with the Guardians and being with a pro organization, they have mental performance in the building. And they're a massive part of kind of our rehab team is making sure that those guys, talking to them, just having a relationship with them, making sure that they're in a good place and that they're always letting them know that they're always available to talk and help them get through stuff. Because rehab is just, there's so much adversity. It is so hard to kind of take, you go through this game, especially the first time you get injured. You go through this game your entire life, especially if you're at the pro level. You've probably done really, really well your entire life. All of a sudden, that's getting stripped from you for over a year. Let's say it's TJ,
Yeah.
right? Like that's really hard, right? To be away from the game, not just to be able to compete for yourself, but not be able to compete for your brothers, not be with your brothers. I mean, like, one of the things we try to do for the big league guys, or the Guardians try to do for the big league guys, that I thought was really, really special. Was like they try to give them, a weekend here or there to go travel with the team, meet them up for a weekend series, like, make sure that the guys know that they're there, or that they know that the guys, are there thinking about them, that they care about them, that, they're rallying behind him. And it just gives them a little bit of a little bit of, to kind of get through the adversity of it. But coming off the back end of it, like there's so many lessons you learn about failing and adversity and struggles, the ups and downs, because there's so many ups and downs in rehab. You learn a lot about your body. You learn a lot about your mind. You learn that you can overcome hard things.
Yeah.
and that you learn that you can get through adversity and that you can be successful. And then when you come out the end of it, like you're a better competitor because of it, because you've been through some hard shit. And when you've been through hard shit, you know that you can survive hard shit. And when you can survive hard shit, you can win, you can compete, you can perform. When a guy gets hits a double off of you, who cares? I'm locked back in. That ain't the end of it. Like you haven't scored a run off me yet. You got to do that again to score a run off of me again. You know what I mean? And it just gives you a little extra chip on your shoulder to know, I've been through some hard shit. I'm gonna win here. I can get through this.
Ty was one of our first rehab cases, right?
Yeah.
At least one of the bigger ones. And that I think that was interesting that he said it was a blessing in disguise for him. Because he had a different perspective of games. When we went into the preseason, like the late preseason before league started, he went and just was trash against one of the best teams, and that was like a wake up call for him. But it was also a moment where he was just like, you know what, I felt good for the first time since like my freshman year. I'm rolling. It's like I'm good for the season. I'm good, which was awesome, and that's a cool way to see guys like kind of flip the switch on that. Because most players are going to view like, oh my God, I did so horrible against one of the best teams in California. I'm so bad. Like, and that's a totally natural reaction too. Like that's a total natural reaction to things. I can't blame guys for having that. I do not like when they have that long term, when they talk about it for, days on end.
Yeah.
But it's cool to see those guys who are bouncing back have that reaction. And now we've had several rehab cases where guys have the same mindset of like, I'll tell you, hey, how'd your first outing go? Rocky, but I felt great.
Yeah.
And then you do get the great ones where it's just like, how'd your first, outing go? And they're like, oh, it was amazing,
Yeah.
But
it's more though than just the performance, right? Like there's so much into this game that makes a difference. And I think a lot of guys, start to learn that when they kind of go through stuff is like, all right, there's more to it. I struggled today. First of all, why did I struggle? Like maybe it's a good thing that you struggled because now you've identified a weakness that you didn't realize was there. You could work on that now. You could be even better for the future. Whereas before you had that weakness, but you just weren't getting it exploited yet, right? It's like there's always a perspective, right? When you fail, it's just data. It's information that you can use to get better. You can either take it as that, or you can take it as a horrible thing that you failed and make it ruin your day, ruin your week, and then you gain nothing from it, except for now your mind is all jumbled up and you're probably not going to perform well in the future. Or you could take it and say, this is information that I've learned. This is how I can get better. This is how I can improve. Let me use that. And then you could also take so one of the things I think this is really valuable that I took from our pitching coach my last couple of years of college. Stephen Bruce is his name. Awesome dude. I played with the Texas Rangers organization for a while, and really awesome dude. But one of the things we would do with our pitching staff and our catchers after every single game, or if it was like if we had a scrimmage day or whatever, the next morning we'd all get up, we'd show up early, about an hour early. We'd meet with the pitchers and catchers, all of the pitchers and all of the catchers. So everybody was on the same page and we all were there to hear it and learn and all that stuff. And we'd go pitcher by pitcher in order of who pitched. And we'd say, all right, one up, one down, and then a reflection on those two things. And if we had more than one up or more than one up, like you could say as much as it wasn't so strict, but an up, a down, and a reflection. And then so the pitcher would do that. The catcher would then give a one up, a down, and a reflection on the pitcher and what they said. And the coach would give a one up, a one down, a reflection on that. And then now we're all learning, right? And
I love that. That's really cool.
And it's not just, I sucked, I did all these things horrible, whatever. Like there's always an up, right? So like if there was nothing good except for the fact that you competed, at least you can identify. But I felt like I still competed my butt off. I didn't have any of my stuff. I felt like crap. I slept like crap. Nothing was going for me, but I kept on competing. I kept my tempo. I kept my demeanor, and at least I could take that with me. and then reflect on, okay, this is how I'm going to get better. Not just I did these things poorly, but now we're going to reflect on these are the things I need to work on. And then now the catcher gives me his feedback of what he saw, because that's a different perspective. And the coach gives his feedback on what he saw, because that's a different perspective. Now I have all this information of what I need to do over the next week to get better. Now that's huge. And a lot of most programs don't do that. And then next thing you know, you're just going through a season and all these mistakes that you could be catching and improving on, and it's just exponentially making you a better pitcher. You're missing all that, and you're just flatlining or getting worse.
Yeah.
It's such
I think it's also, no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying that it's just such a learning opportunity.
No, I think that's also really good for guys who might struggle with some self-confidence issues on the mound, because if you're able to identify, okay, this was bad, but I did this really well. And then you get another person's perspective on it who maybe backs you up, but also maybe says no, they give you a different vantage point. You can start to be like, okay, I haven't thought about it that way. I'm gonna look through that lens, and I'm gonna work through that lens too, and that might yield you a completely different result, which then starts to, you can build off of those successes even if you had a bad game.
Mm-hmm.
It could be as simple as I still felt good. I still felt like I could have kept pitching, things like that.
And I think too, part of that is because of the way that frames it, right? You're not, by talking about your failures, you're not losing confidence. I always felt, even if I pitched like shit and had a lot of bad things to say, I always felt like I came out of it with more confidence than when I went into it, because I identified things that I did well, but I also talked about how I was going to improve upon the things that I did poorly, which gives you confidence too, right? So not only am I gaining information about how I can be better, but I'm also gaining confidence, which is huge.
Mm-hmm.
It's massive.
Yeah.
Especially in a sport like baseball, you need confidence to be successful.
100%. I think we've hit a lot of topics here that we could just hit so many different rabbit holes, and we should start saving some of these up for future podcast episodes so we can really dive deep into these.
Yeah.
So
to finish it off, man.
Yeah. I think for those of you who have tuned in this far, thank you. But B, share, subscribe, drop a comment on anything we've touched so far. Let us know what you want to hear more of. Again, this is going to be more of an open forum. We're going to have guests on soon. But we want to create, we're not making money off this. This isn't, we're trying to create something that you guys can listen to, watch, whatever it is, and hear some different perspectives, hear from different people, hear our perspective, and and learn. This whole thing's about learning. You need to be a lifelong learner, whether it be in a classroom setting or outside of that. You have to be learning. If you're not learning, you're falling behind. You're either getting better, worse, or even worse, staying the same. So this whole thing is about you guys. It's not about us. We're trying to create something bigger. Not everyone's going to work with Fearless Sports Performance, but we can at least try and spread this culture as far as we possibly can.
Yeah, we want to be able to positively affect as many people as possible, and that's what this is about. But yeah, welcome to the pod, y'all. Stay fearless, and let's keep on rocking.
Let's rock it. All right, guys. Like, share, subscribe, and comment.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Stay Fearless, the Fearless Sports Performance podcast with all things baseball performance training. If you enjoyed this episode, please share, subscribe, comment, reach out to us, and keep the conversation going. You can check out our website at fearlesssportsperformance.weebly.com, and you can find us on Instagram at Fearless Sports Performance or on X at FearlessBSBL. Until next time, stay fearless.